While I was digging through some historical archives recently, I stumbled across a story that literally felt like a buried secret. It was like finding a piece of history that someone, somewhere, intentionally tried to erase from the textbooks. Welcome to this explainer. As I was researching African political history, I uncovered this incredibly powerful, painful, and just deeply fascinating narrative about a man they often called Africa's Che Guevara. Today, we're going to look at a leader whose legacy was hidden away, but whose ideas simply refused to disappear. When you hear the phrase, the most dangerous man in Africa, who pops into your head? A warlord? Maybe a terrorist? Or a ruthless dictator? Well, my research showed that the man who terrified the global establishment back in the 1980s was actually a president, and his great, unforgivable crime, at least according to his supporters, he just wanted his country to stop relying on Western aid. Chapter 1, A Forgotten African Hero, the boy from Yako who shook a continent. So this story actually starts back in 1949 with a young boy named Thomas Sankara. He was from a small town called Yako in what was then known as Upper Volta. As he grew up and joined the military, historical accounts note how he watched corrupt leaders live lavishly while ordinary citizens literally starved. And according to his biographers, this fueled a really profound anger in him against the establishment. During his military training in Madagascar, he observed popular uprisings and came to the conclusion that the region's absolute biggest problem was a lack of courageous leadership. Fast forward to 1983. Following a massive revolution supported by the people, Thomas Sankara becomes the president of Upper Volta. He is just 33 years old. Think about that for a second. At 33, when most of us are just trying to figure out our career paths, Sankara is suddenly carrying the weight of an entire nation right on his shoulders. Historically, leadership in that region was often characterized by buying private jets, demanding absolute worship, and living in unimaginable luxury. But Sankara took the exact opposite approach. To serve his people, he actually sold off the expensive government fleet and drove a simple, cheap Renault car. He refused air conditioning in his office simply because the ordinary citizens he served couldn't afford it. He even banned his own portrait from being hung up in public buildings. To his followers, this represented a radical rejection of the systemic corruption that plagued the continent. He didn't want worship, he just wanted to serve.
Chapter 2, The Radical Economic Reforms, Turning Madness into Self-Sufficiency.
Sankara had a mindset that fueled some of the most radical economic policies the continent had ever seen. He was absolutely determined to turn what foreign critics called madness into total self-sufficiency for his people. And one of the very first things he did was completely reject the colonial legacy. The name Upper Volta was actually given to the country by the French. Sankara stripped it away, renaming his nation Burkina Faso, which translates to the land of upright people. To his citizens, it wasn't just a rebrand. It was a loud, undeniable message to the rest of the world that they would no longer live on their knees. As I looked at the historical data from his presidency, the sheer velocity of his domestic reforms is honestly staggering. Once he empowered his people to stand up right, they went straight to work. In just a matter of years, schools and hospitals were built across the nation. His administration spearheaded massive vaccination campaigns that saved millions of children from disease. He fiercely advocated for women, placing them in key positions of power and actively fighting against forced marriage. And get this, in the 1980s, long before it was a mainstream global talking point, he initiated the planting of millions of trees to stop desertification and protect the environment. The real engine behind all this progress was his core doctrine of economic self-reliance. Sankara defined this as strict government policy, arguing that Africans must produce what they eat, wear what they make, and depend entirely on themselves to break the endless cycle of foreign aid. And as I continued digging into his files, I realized just how monumental this was. This framework of absolute self-reliance became a lasting ideological blueprint for future generations of anti-imperialist thinkers across Africa. Because of this policy, citizens felt like their government finally belonged to them rather than to foreign businessmen. Chapter 3, The Anti-Colonial Voice, Speaking to the World as a Free African Man. Now, Sankara wasn't just transforming his country internally, he was taking to the global stage. He wasn't speaking as a subordinate, but as a free, independent African man. And that deeply unsettled some very powerful international figures. He stood before world leaders and famously declared, "Debt is a cleverly managed reconquest of Africa." He openly exposed the international financial system, framing foreign debt as a chain specifically designed to keep African nations subservient. Decades later, these exact anti-colonial speeches had such a massive long-term impact that they are still heavily quoted in modern geopolitical debates about international debt. To the global financial establishment, his demands for total independence were so highly disruptive that he actually acknowledged exactly how radical he appeared. He famously stated, "You cannot carry out fundamental change without a certain amount of madness." A president living simply and outright refusing foreign influence was such a massive shock to the established global order that it genuinely looked like madness to those entrenched in the system. Chapter 4: A Painful Betrayal. The Tragic Cost of True Independence. As I researched how this story ended, uncovering the details became incredibly painful. History has this heartbreaking pattern where leaders who push for this level of true independence rarely live long. Foreign powers were getting uncomfortable, and Sankara was becoming way too influential. Then came October 15, 1987. Sankara was attending a meeting with his comrades when suddenly gunshots erupted. Chaos and fear filled the room, and in mere moments, the revolution in Burkina Faso suffered a catastrophic tragedy. What makes this tragedy so agonizing to read about is who actually pulled the trigger. Thomas Sankara had given everything to create an independent Africa, but the coup was led by Blaise Compaoré. Compaoré wasn't an enemy from afar. He was Sankara's closest friend and his trusted brother in the revolution. Historical analyses suggest that international discomfort with Sankara's economic policies, combined with intense internal power struggles, culminated in this ultimate deadly betrayal from within. Witnesses from that dark day reported that as the gunfire started, Sankara told his men not to fight back. He calmly stepped out and just said, "It is I they want." He faced death with quiet dignity, making the ultimate sacrifice to protect his comrades from the violence. Reading through these accounts, it's pretty clear he knew the heavy risks of speaking out against global exploitation, and he fully accepted his fate. He was only 37 years old. Chapter 5: An Immortal Legacy. Why his ideas refused to disappear. Immediately after his murder, the revolution weakened, and a lot of his domestic policies were rapidly reversed. For years, people were terrified to even speak his name out loud. The world tried its absolute hardest to erase Thomas Sankara entirely. But digging into the long-term impact of his anti-colonial speeches and his economic framework reveals something really incredible. The attempts to bury him completely failed. His blueprint for self-reliance and his defiant speeches survive today as foundational texts for modern activists. Young Africans today are acting like historical detectives themselves, rediscovering his teachings outside of standard textbooks. He remains this massive continental symbol, proving that true leadership is defined by sacrifice, and his economic theories continue to deeply influence how developing nations approach foreign aid today. So we leave you with this really profound question. What happens to a world when honest leaders are removed? Sankara proved that while you can eliminate a man, his ideas can literally become immortal. Uncovering this buried piece of history completely shifted my perspective. If learning about this touched you, if it made you think or inspired you to look deeper, please take a second to support this channel. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so we can keep uncovering these vital stories together. Thank you so much for taking the time to explore this explainer with me today, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.